皆様お待たせ。
Thank you very much for waiting. We would like to start the parallel session number 1 about green economy and economic integration in the Asia-Pacific region. The speakers are already seated at the front. Mr. Freishen, who was supposed to come, was not able to attend this meeting as a speaker. The moderator is Mr. Kazuo Matsushita, Senior Fellow of IJS. I now hand over to you, Professor Matsushita. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the kind introduction. I am Matsushita, Senior Fellow of IJS. Also, I'm a Professor Emeritus of Kyoto University. We are going to discuss green economy and economic integration in the Asia-Pacific region. In the morning session, we also had a lot of discussion on green economy. Based on what we discussed in the morning session, first of all, we would like to discuss what green economy means, and also green economy, how is it positioned in international community, and also in this session, what are we going to discuss? That's something I would like to first of all explain at the outset of the meeting session. First of all, what is green economy? The definition of green economy. Regarding green economy, international consensus has yet to be made. There are various definitions. Also, the concept of green economy itself also faces certain resistance as well. However, I would like to introduce to you a definition made by UNEP. Allow me to read it in
as one that results in improved human well-being and social equity, while significantly reducing environmental risks and ecological scarcities.
As you can see from this, human well-being should be improved, and also social equity has to be improved as well in green economy. But at the same time, the environmental risks and ecological sacrifices have to be reduced significantly.
Unemployment should be driven by public and private investment that reduce carbon emissions and pollution, enhance energy and resource efficiency, and prevent the loss of biodiversity and ecosystem services. ということで、こういったですね。
So in this way, the public and private level investment has to be a driver for growth in income and employment. And also, that kind of investment has to reduce carbon emissions and pollution, enhance energy and resource efficiency, and prevent the loss of biodiversity and ecosystem services. Therefore, the direction of investment has to be changed. Now, that is a definition of green economy. If green economy is realized, what kind of effects can be expected is explained here. First of all, resource energy efficiency is to be raised. Environmental efficiency will be improved as well. And second effect is to produce a new green market technology and job creation. So we will be able to have a new green market together with development of new technologies and job creation. Third benefit of green economy is to improve resilience. Resilience from natural and human disasters. On the other hand, we will be able to enhance food, water, energy security. This is one of the expected effects of green economy. Fourth point, multiple benefits. Ecological, economic, social benefits can be expected. They will include regional and global and short and long-term benefits as well. And the very last bullet point is important. It is often emphasized significantly in the international community. Basis for sustainable livelihood.
Who rely on ecological services. ということで、途上国やそれから貧しい人々、そういった人たちは 生態系サービスだとか、自然資本に依存している。
So in this way, basis for sustainable livelihood will be provided, particularly for rural poor, and also many people are living in vulnerable communities which rely on ecological services. These are the expected effects of green economy. Now, in the international community, what is the position of a green economy? Last year, there was a Rio Plus 20 conference. In that meeting, a very harsh discussion took place. But at the end of the day, they came to the following conclusion.
Important as one of the important tools for achieving sustainable development ということで、グリーン経済をですね、持続可能な発展を達成する上で重要なツールとして考える。
So, green economy is a very important tool to achieve sustainable development. This is an international consensus.
に対して、マッチングイントレストを
So, paragraph 66 says we invite in the UN system to coordinate and provide information on A, matching interested countries with partners, B, toolboxes and or best practices in applying policies on green economy, and C, models on good or green examples of policies on green economy. And D is the methodologies for evaluation of policies on green economy. And E is existing and emerging platforms that contribute in this regard. So from these perspectives, we are to produce international platform. So against the backdrop of such discussion, in our parallel session today, we would like to achieve the following.
それから share experiences 経験を交流し and propose initiatives to strengthen the nexus of green economy and economic integration in Asia and the Pacific ということでアジア太平洋地域でグリーンエコノミーに関する
So, as is mentioned, this is what we would like to achieve in this session. Particularly, we would like to focus the following: green investment and economic integration, low carbon green growth and regional cooperation, and border carbon adjustment to address international competitiveness and carbon leakage. Carbon adjustment tax is to be imposed in order to adjust the difference in terms of the emissions volume in order to internalize the emissions. Originally, we had 4 speakers for this session. However, Mr. Shen from the UNEP is absent, so we have 3 speakers. For 15 minutes each, I would like to give the floor to each one of the speakers. First of all, Dr. Venkatashalam Ambumoze from ADB. Dr. Ambumoze of ADB.
ADB?
Okay, thank you, Matsushita Sensei. And by the way of introduction, I am Venkatachalam Anbumoli. So very long. So you can call me as Anbu, A-N-B-U, Anbu. Anbu means love in my language. What I'm going to do in the next 15 minutes is just to give the glimpses of one of the studies that has been done by ADB and ADBI, and this is titled as the Low Carbon Green Growth in Asia Policies and Practices. I think this book can be downloaded from our website. And what it says, basically, there are 3 messages that is the book says, and it's also my message for this panel discussion. One is from the morning, actually, we have been discussing in the green economy or green growth or low carbon green growth, whatever name you can give. But we want to say that is this book says, and the book proves that is Asia is taking the actions. It is not simply a watcher. And this transformation to the low carbon green economy is already happening in Asia. And these actions are verifiable and reportable. Second message is, though actions are taken and it can be made more inclusive. So we need policy interventions. And third message is the title of this one. This is regional cooperation. That is, we all work together and we can move fast, more efficiently. To start the discussions or to start your thoughts, I think you can look into that is how we moved, actually how Asia moved with the global economy. That is, it moved from agrarian economy to that industrial economy, and most of the economies now are in the knowledge or the information, innovative knowledge. So some part of Asia, basically all these 3 or 4 type of economy exist, and the integration is already happening. And most of this integration is driven by the export-led growth. And this integration and this economic growth, and some of the countries are moving very fast. For example, take China, it is about 10%, and it is almost a trade surplus country among all the other economies, as well as the other economies in the region. And some countries like East Asia, I think mostly it is driven by the industrial technologies, and they are basically export-oriented growth. And this economic growth and the integration has also implications on the environment as well as the inequality. And if you see, this is the indicators of our inequality and the environmental stress that is our countries face. And if you see, that is we are living in a very unsafe environment. That is the first figure on the left-hand side is this air pollution level. And second thing is, you can see that is how water stressed we are and how our per capita emissions are emerging out. So what is this challenge, I think, is that our economic growth has been unsustainable, and we are consuming more materials and energy than our predecessors. And this carbon emission is expected to triple by 2050. It is about 47% of the world emissions if we continue to the same growth. And then another thing is still we have that inequality about we need to provide electricity to 1.9 billion people. Still, these people are now living without the electricity, and about 700 million people lack access to the clean fuels. So this is a challenge that we are facing. And another thing is also windows of opportunities narrowing down. That is, most of our economies are growing at 7% and 3%. So this growth actually, that is, we are already started investing in the large infrastructures, and so there is the opportunity to avoid the lock-in effects are narrowing down. So what is for all these things indicate that we need a kind of a new development paradigm that is resource efficient, low carbon green growth that is also inclusive. So what this book and this study in the next 10 minutes I would like to stress is where is emerging Asia when it comes to responding to this resource efficient, low carbon green growth, or in other way that is tackling the climate change. Don't put much into the definitions or what you are doing, but see the actions. So that is we look into the actions. Then there is what are the current national and the sectoral actions, and what needs to be done to accelerate the transition, and how much cost it takes. This is the basic questions that we tried to answer this study, and we got some interesting findings. One is that we need energy. We need energy for the growth, and if you see that past history and past historical development path, it is very evident. That is, to grow and to develop our human development indexes, we need energy. It's a very positive correlation. Unfortunately, still, I think most of our access to that energy is coming from the solid fuels, and so it also results in the deforestation rates. So we are depleting our resources. We are depleting the resources in an unprecedented way. So then if you see that is our material, that is a total material consumption. It is not only that is one energy material, but also the total consumption of the forestry product, biomass, and this total material content, water, and the finished materials. If you are combined together, and if we correlate these emissions here, you can find that is a very positive correlation. And most of these energy resource-rich countries, they are consuming much more and they are emitting much more. So what is the option available? Actually, that is one thing is that is here we are emerging, and we need to go to that see a sustainable green economy. And there is advanced economies like Japan and Europe, and they are already realizing they are in the sustainable path, and they need to go back to this. Actually, they are revising their path. So now the question to that emerging Asia is that is what will be the best path? And then what is the pragmatic path? I think that is we need energy we need to emit. Then we try to answer that path. This is what is the best path for these emerging Asias, and knowing that is the risk of collapse is there, and if we don't act. So here that is so for this study we had a consultations, and these are basically that is plotting against this GDP and this emission growth. And here we find that is two type of patterns that is evolving. One is high carbon growth path in the resource-rich countries, and is a low carbon inclusive growth. And see, here we say that is as we said the morning, and we had a lot of co-benefits. And by investing in this low carbon inclusive development model could be feasible, and it can be inclusive and value creating model for the most of the emerging Asia when considering this inclusivity is concerned. So then the next thing is that is we assess it. Basically, we assess what are the different actions that has been taken by these countries. And here we see that is most of these countries that happened, that is basically they are taking up these low-hanging fruits, and regulations and the financial incentives and institutions are given for the energy efficiency and the renewable energy. We had the innovations like feed-in tariff is there. Most of the countries, RPS standards are there. And we also, most of the countries are introducing the tax on the fossil fuels with the political will. And still that new low carbon technologies, also some of the countries like China is already investing nearly 2% of their GDP on the R&D. So things are happening. I think this is the one message that is we want to prove, that is Asia is not simply watching, it is taking actions, and these actions are replicable, and these actions are upscalable, and these actions are appreciable. I think Asia is the only region that is making all these actions in a different way. And this different way is that it is not taking the actions not for the benefit of the global community, but it's for own interest. These NAMA commitments, these are the indications of that is they are taking actions in their own way. And you can see that it's a different standard settings, different target settings. They know that is what is the best for them, and what is the best to bring that inclusivity and to bring the sustainability. So this is the one message that is coming out. And if you analyze this classification of the policy instruments, it could be classified into technology-based and this carbon-based, that is a pricing-based. I think here you can see that is most of these, our inventions, our experiences are technology-based. Actually, we try to introduce the technologies. So far, we have the limited experiences, but the experiments has already been started in the carbon pricing scheme also, as seen in the Tokyo, and is also seen in China, and India is also taking the efforts. So these are some of the specific policy instruments that has been practiced by these countries. So we are proud of it, and we are learning from it. And we also see that is the impact of these policy instruments on the total emissions on the carbon intensity. That is here, if you can see, that is how the China has moved from how it can improve this carbon productivity over the 10 to 15 years period. The results are very positive, and this can be speeded up furthermore. But the challenge is that is still we are not enough. I think if you say take these current projections, and here we say kind of negative image that is we get, and if you take in the 2035 and we get nearly Asia will be producing more CO2 emission than the other regions combined together. I think most of these future emissions will be coming from this world's production factory, that is Asia. So today morning also we had a discussion on this 2 degrees centigrade. And this 2 degrees centigrade has to be translated into 21.7 gigatons. And so these things, with these current policies, and we cannot achieve it. So we need new policies, and we need to upscale these policies. That is to bring down to 14.5 gigatons. So this one cannot be done by the rich countries, and it has to be done by the emerging Asian economies, and it has to be done in a cooperative way. And that is one message that is we want to create. And then we look into that is how these new policies and how we can improve it. One thing is that is, as I mentioned ago, our current policy actions are skewed towards technology-based and regulatory-based, or command and control. Here we want to say that is we need to combine the regulations and incentives and carbon price signals and the new financial mechanisms to accelerate the transition. So we need regulations, much more stronger regulations to achieve these targets, and we need market-based policies and policies to accelerate the co-benefits, innovations, and the technology diffusion. And we also need much more institutional reforms to synergize the action by the sectoral actions. So then this report recommends, and basically these are captured from these regional initiatives and what it can be done at the sector level. That is, here we have the recommendations and the observations for the energy sector. That is, see cost-effective, market-based solutions for the uptake of existing technologies. We don't need to innovate more technologies. Current existing technology itself is enough, but that need much more trade liberalization. And for energy efficiency, it need a combination of the regulations and the market-based mechanisms. For the transport, we need to find the financial incentive mechanisms to alter the current fleet growth patterns. And also, most of our economies are agrarian, and still we need to identify immediate action needs to restore the carbon sinks. Here also there is a venue for these new market-based mechanisms like RED+. And for the urban sectors, we need to scale up the coordinated policies. Here we cannot take into only transport. We need a kind of integrated urban policy improvements. And there is also a role for the fiscal policies, which most of the planning and the finance ministries so far has been neglecting. Here we need a kind of implementing this neutral, that is new carbon study, the carbon neutral budget or the revenue neutral budget. That is, we need a kind of new innovations in introducing these tax experiments. For that, we need a MRV system. So at the budget level. This is the thing, and this is some of the actions that can be accelerated at the national level, but we need to look for the regional cooperation, I think, particularly for the dissemination and diffusion of the technologies. Here, this chart is very obvious. I think here most of these, here you can see that is how the tariff rate for these low carbon goods and services. WTO has classified about 152 technologies, goods and services, and here you can see that is most of these tariff barriers exist in the developing countries and the least developed countries. Here is the one area that is we need to look into consideration, and there are a lot of policy frictions within the nations, and there are a lot of behind the border constraints that has to be removed for the diffusion of more low carbon technologies. Another area for the regional cooperation is the finance. We have plenty of money. I think today morning, I think VP Lohani mentioned this. There are different estimates of this investment needed for the low carbon growth. It is one of these things, but under the 250 scenario, I think here most of investments are about, Asia needs 43% of the total investment at the global level. And these are the different policy instruments, that is a different type of instrument that is available. Here you can see that is a public finance. It is still limited, Most of our government budgets are very scarce and they are limited. And so private finance, it is available in the plenty. And here that is, we need to bring in the private finance first. I think there are a lot of resources are available. But the thing is, there is a viability gap. That is the thing. Here, there is an increased role for the governments, and the governments can provide the guarantees. And if we all come together, this investment market, if this market is integrated, then it could easily attract the investments from the Europe and the US. That is the point that we would like to make. And this is the framework, basically, the study. So that is, Asia has to work within this regional framework. That is a global framework. But sometimes it needs to be supportive or complement with the regional actions, because that process, global process, already slowed down. But these things has to come from the strong domestic policies. Without strong domestic policies, this regional cooperation framework cannot work, but this regional cooperation should be complementary to the global framework. Then we have listed about 10 concrete actions. That is, these are the perspectives from the emerging Asia. Actually, that is, we went for the consultation, and the senior policymakers, they themselves listed what are the priority actions for the regional cooperation. And here, once we start with the public-private dialogue. And second thing is about low-carbon innovation centers, tied with the NAMA commitments, and the phasing out the subsidies in a gradual and phased-out manner to avoid this losing the competitiveness, and this regional carbon market, and also enlarge this, enhance the free trade agreements to include these low-carbon goods and services. And also here we need to be innovative and strengthen the regional financial mechanisms, particularly this SDR that is available in the IMF. Whether we can use that as Asian money for the Asian growth, we need to work together. And also we need to work on this RED Plus, that is creating a platform to start the negotiations. And also much more important is this kind of events and the forums for capacity building and the knowledge sharing. And eventually, what is the key message is that we develop a kind of a key niche. There's a co-benefit, and this co-benefit has to be penetrated at the national level. That need a synergized actions by the different sectoral ministries, and then regional cooperation will provide a kind of architecture to accelerate all these actions. So, if you want to give more details, and you can download this book, and if you have any other questions and answers, and I will come back in the next round of discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ambimori, for your very informative presentation. アンビモリさんは
Dr. Ambimori talked about the limits of Asian growth, which is unsustainable under the current scenario. However, on the other hand, we are seeing already the start of the transition to the low-carbon economy, and regional cooperation is very important for that. So toward the end of the presentation, he made several recommendations in order to enhance cooperation in this region. We would like to have time for general discussion at the end of this session, but I would like to open the floor for questions for clarification on Dr. Ambimori's presentation. I have time for 2 or 3 questions only for clarification purposes at this point in time.
Thank you very much. My name is Hiroshi. It is very insightful presentations. I have one comment regarding this issue, green economy and growth. Most people say they suggest establish some financing or innovation center and technology transfer. But there is one important lacking items. I think it is the changing of the way of life, not significantly weighing technologies, but weighing, improving, or changing the life which requires less energy, but maintain or improve their quality of life. If we don't access this area, we repeat the era of the advanced countries, which consumes lots of energies and inefficient way to establish their life. Especially the emerging country, their population is huge, and also the population gathers in that massive way in the city. So it means unless we change those items, way of life, including the layout of the towns, cities, these things should be considered, I think. How do you think?
Thank you very much for that comment. Well, changing lifestyles, I think that was one issue you raised. So, any views on this matter?
Yes, I agree with you 200%. That is, all the changes has to start from at the individual level, and human beings are the basic economic unit. I think this economic unit, if it doesn't change, and nothing is going to change. So in this aspect, actually, for this study, actually, that is, we commissioned about 22 background papers, including one is written by IGS, and we have one background paper that is already available in our website that is particularly discussing about what are the lifestyle changes. This at the individual level and at the community level we can adopt. So that is, you can refer to it, and that gives the full details, and this is also available somewhere referred in this chapter 3 of this book. And we re-emphasize it. And another thing is here, going beyond this one, I think individually, we are also economic unit, but we are also an animal. Human beings are animals. We don't change. And we have that animal instincts that rest with us. So there is a role for the government providing the incentives and providing the regulations. I think many of you know that is, we know that is vegetarian style of life is more environment friendly, but we don't adapt. But if you put a tax on non-vegetarian food, then usually we will think about it. Another thing is this battery, that is rechargeable battery and the ordinary battery. Still, they coexist. Still, we don't have the political will to ban these non-polluting factories. So there is a role for the government, and also there is a role for the government in providing the infrastructure. I think that is now most of these carbon emitting and is American lifestyle. Why they are like that? This decision was already done in 1930s. When there was a Great Depression, the government invested on building the highways. So these highways promoted this more car use. Now they cannot be, they are already locked in. So by providing this kind of urban planning and the urban structure, and the government can make the choice, and they can also help the people to change their lifestyle. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One more question if you have. はい、どうぞ。はい。
Thank you, sir, for your informative presentation. Near the end of, my name is Kenji Watanabe. Near the end of your presentation, you talked about public financing and private financing. I just want some clarifications and elaboration about that particular slide. You talked about USA provide like 2856 like billion or million public financing, and China 2794. Just want like I just want to know, like, who is eligible to get that kind of public-private financing, and then, like, what type of organization, like, providing that amount of finance?
I want to clarify actually that the last slide is basically showing what is the need, I think, and then what is the supply. And supply means basically that slide may be misleading. One is that is we based on this IEA data, that is scenario analysis, and we say that what is much more needed for particularly in the energy, transport, water, and forestry structure. How much money is needed? It's a kind of stock. So that figure shows that is based on that estimates, Asia needs about 47% of total resources for the future investment to reduce this 450 ppm scenario. So that is a scientific calculation. So this is the need. Then on the right-hand side, I showed what are the different supply sources. And these supply sources may be broadly classified into three. One is public, that is government itself is investing. That comes from your taxpayers' money, basically that is government revenue. Or it has to borrow from other countries. And second thing is the ODA, particularly the developing countries, official development assistance. That also includes some kind of multilateral banking. And then third one is this private financing. And so far, the magnitude of the flow of the government financing and the ODA is much more less when compared to their private sector funding. And this private sector funding, basically, there's now the policy or the mentality is that is put the first public finance, and that is often it is catalyzed by the ODA or the multilateral finance. Then finally the private finance. But my proposition is here that is bring that private financial sector first. Then see that is how this public finance can leverage it. So it is kind of, there is always a viability gap fund or the guarantee systems. So this limited public finance can be used to leverage this private capital. And this private capital can be from world market, and sometimes it may be outside the Asia also. But still Asia has the opportunity to look inside and where our foreign reserves are deposited. I think most of them goes to that is other stock markets or the US Treasury, and here if you find a mechanisms to invest, that is to put that investment coming to this green infrastructure, and then there is a lot of opportunities available, but we need to be innovative, and it needs some sort of political will and guarantee systems.
はい、ありがとうございました。それでは
Thank you very much. Because of the time constraint, let's move on to the next speaker, who is from NIS, National Institute for Environmental Studies, Mr. Ashina. Shuichi Ashina, please.
So thank you for Matsushita Sensei. And first of all, I'd like to thank for the organizers, ISAP and UNU-IAS, to giving us this valuable opportunity to sharing our research outcomes about the low carbon society development or low carbon development strategy in the Asian countries. And actually, our approach is not only focused on the economy side. We are mainly focused on the energy side. But in the Matsushita Sensei's presentation, based on the definitions of the UNEP, the low carbon development or creating the low carbon society is totally involved in green economies. So today, I'd like to talk about the low carbon society or low carbon development strategy and its relationships to the green economy in the next 15 minutes. So first of all, I'd like to mention that importance of the taking actions towards a low carbon society in the Asian countries. Here, this picture shows the trends of the GDP and energy and GHG emissions. And in the 1990, around 20 years ago, Asia had almost 20% of share in the GDP. And for the energy and GHG, 1/4 is occupied or consumed or emitted by the Asian countries. And 2008, maybe 5 years before, share of GDP growing up to the 24%. And the energy and the GHG also growing up and rated at 35% for the energy and 38% for GHGs. And if we do not take any actions, it not only mean the Asian countries, but also global scale. Every country is not take any actions. We estimated that the half of GHG emission comes from Asia. And also GDP and energy comes from the Asia. So if we, Asian countries, does not take any action for the reducing the GHG emissions, the world could not stabilize the climate change. So our actions, Asia actions, is crucial for stabilizing our stabilizing the climate or solving the global warming issues. So that, but for achieving the Asia low-carbon society or low-carbon development in Asian countries, we need the scenarios or we need some guidelines or roadmaps how to do it. So from 2009, we have conducted the research project on the Asia low-carbon society scenarios towards 2050. And in this project's final outcome is the showing or proposing the policy package for Asia low-carbon societies. And it includes encouraging and framing for low-carbon policy in each Asian countries and assistance for international negotiation with scientific basis. So international negotiation mainly focus on the COP process. And approaches for the International Low-Carbon Society Activity Framework, and the final one is the networking among the LCS researchers in Asia. And the final point is has been already started, the name of LOCARNET, Low Carbon Asia Research Network, which is headed by the ISAP, Professor Nishioka. And during the process, in this project, we have 5 subgroups. First one is a core group for development of Asia LCS scenarios. And the second group seeks sustainability, focus on the sustainability, sustainable development through the LCS in the Asian countries. And third group is focused on the institutional design for international cooperation. And another 2 groups may focus on how to change the society or how to change the system for using the resources or the transportation system. And the fourth group is the sustainable resource management, and the final group, 5th group, is the work on transportation. And finally, we are now actually this fiscal year is the final year for this research project, and we are now final stage for making our final outcomes. But anyhow, I'd like to talk about the current progress for our research project. And so far, up to now, we designed or we depicted the pathways and the necessary countermeasures for low-carbon Asia. And this graph shows the pathway for the GHG reduction, not only in Asian countries, but also the global scale, also shown in the dotted line and solid line in the above. And this graph shows some wedges for the countermeasures to reducing GHG emissions in Asian countries. So we found that if we want to aim to the Asia to low carbon countries, low carbon regions, then we need to take some CCS and nuclear, renewables, and energy efficiency also very important. So purple area, maybe this is the most convenient way, I think. So this area is the energy efficiency. Reduction by the energy efficiency measure. So, and here is electricity demand reduction. And here is a renewable. And the final one is the nuclear. So actually, this analysis started before the Fukushima accident. And so far, of course, we have investigated about the reactions of the Asian countries about the Fukushima accident. But so far, we have not find any drastic changes their plan for enhancing the nuclear power. So still, in this analysis, we expected that some portion of the installation of nuclear could reduce GHG emissions in Asian countries. Anyhow, so we found the way, or we found the pathway for the GHG reduction in the Asian countries. But Asia. Here, I say only the Asia as one region. But as you know, the Asia has a large diversity. In the Asian regions, we have a huge economic activity, as I shown in the second slide. But in Asian countries, have the many developing countries. So such countries, future GHG emission will drastically increase. So like China and India, if they do not take any action for the GHG reduction, so then many estimation like IEA or some other, of course, we ourselves estimate that drastic increase for the GHG emission in the future, and. In the Asian countries, many Asian countries have other issues not really directly related to the climate change, like such as MDGs, Millennium Development Goals. It's related to the poverty and the pollution, and such issue needs to be solved at the same time solving the climate change. So we need to depict the win-win strategy to solve both climate change and the other issues in Asia. So we have developed national, or sometimes sub-national, or low carbon society scenarios in collaboration with local stakeholders. So stakeholder is including the researchers and Asian countries, universities, or research institutions, and some policymakers. So like this, we named it the core research members, and we have a collaborative with research with each countries and the research institutes or the universities, and finally we will bring to our results to the policymakers and central or sometimes regional governments and development agencies and NGOs. That is our approach. And so far, we have developed several countries' scenarios shown here. And actually, these two scenarios, this green one and this is, you can see the Kyoto. These two are the city level low carbon society scenarios in Japan, but the others are the focus on the Asian countries. And here is Malaysia low carbon society scenarios. Here is Ahmedabad and India. And the Bhopal. These are the India cities or national nations in India. And we try to depict or create the low carbon society scenario in Vietnam and Bangladesh, also finished. And the Gansu, the Jilin, in China, both are the Chinese city, has been developed. But we found that the effects of countermeasures. So countermeasure is not only including the technology, but also the policy is also treated as a countermeasures. But anyhow, the effect of countermeasures differs country by country. So here is the example for the Thailand and Vietnam. Left-hand side is Thailand, and the right-hand side is Vietnam. Both countries are the target year is the same, 2030. And their expected reduction of the GHG emission by taking the countermeasures almost similar. In the Thailand case, they expect to be reducing the 43% from the BAO scenarios. And the Vietnam case, they expect to the reducing the GHG emissions from 40% from the BAU case. But if you see the components of the countermeasures or effect of the countermeasures, so Thailand is deeply relies on the reduction in the power generation and the industry. In the power generation, low carbon generation, installation of low carbon generation, it's not only including the renewable, but also the energy efficient installation of the energy efficient power plants, fossil-fired power plants. And for the industry, energy efficient appliances and the fuel shift. Anyhow, these two sectors have a very key role to reducing the Thailand's GHG emissions. But in the Vietnam case, power generation in the industry has almost 1/4 or some kind of 20%. But in contrast, the building sector not only including the commercial, but also in this case, residential sector is also including, but the building sector and the transport seems to be very important, has an important role for reducing the GHG emission in the Vietnam case. So such situation is found for every country or every region. So from the viewpoint of the research work, maybe most honest way is just simply say that the Asian low carbon society is feasible, but every country should take their own way to the low carbon society countermeasures. But in this project, we try to identify the commonality or key elements among the Asian regions. So, and we found that these 10 aspects or these 2 elements are commonly important for achieving the low carbon society. And actually, these 10 actions is summarized in this brochure, 10 Actions Low Carbon Asia. But unfortunately, this time, we bring the very few pieces of copies of this brochure. So if you want to read it, please contact me. This is free, no problem. No need to pay fare. Anyhow, each actions, these 10 actions gives an essential philosophy for formulate concrete strategies for low carbon Asia. So this 10 actions always show the philosophy or the key message or showing the direction for formulating the policy and the technologies or strategies for each country or each region for low carbon society actions. So there is other ways for achieving low carbon Asia, as shown in the last slide, but every weight should follow at least one of 10 philosophies. And action 1 and 2, actually these are mainly focused on the transport. And the 3 is the resource and the materials, and it's strongly related to the industry. And the 4th one is building. And the 5 and 6 are the energy system, and the 7 and 8 is so-called afford sector, agriculture and the forest and the land use sector. And the 9 and 10 is not directly related to the reduction of the GHG emissions. But these 2 actions are indispensable for achieving the low carbon society. So action 9 is addressing or pointing out technological diffusion or technology transformation and financing. And during the Q&A session and Ampersand presentation, some people mentioned the question about financing. So it's common things for us, even for us. Technology diffusion, technology transformation, and finance is without financing, low carbon society in Asia is hard to achieve it. I couldn't say it's important, but it's hard to achieve it. And the final one is governance. In some countries, some researchers pointed out that they need to growing up their governance. So we pointed out that in order to low carbon or achieving the low carbon society in Asian countries, the governance aspect is very important. So anyhow, these two are the key or the common field for achieving, common direction for achieving the low carbon Asia. And these are the relationships, the actions and the DHG reactions. But anyway, due to the time limits, I skipped it. And here, it's originally the color. This roadmap is written in the color, but I'm not quite sure why this is monotone, change it to the monotone. But anyhow, in this brochure, where it also formulates a recommendation for the recommendation for the roadmaps, recommended roadmaps for achieving the low carbon societies. And recommendation designs by taking into account the interrelationships between individual policies and the sequence in which they should be implemented. And here is this is also changed to gray. But anyhow, in recommendation also reveals the necessary actions to be taken by governments and the private sectors and citizens and the international cooperation agencies on a private basis. So I couldn't show that in detail in this presentation because its time is very limited. So if we want to know more about our recommendation or our philosophy, please check this brochure. Back to the green economy. And the first part of my presentation, as I said, that's based on the OECD, UNEP? Oh, maybe UNEP, sorry. I miss the name. But UNEP picked up the 10 sectors as key for green economy. And agriculture and fisheries, or something like that. And from the viewpoint of the low carbon society development, Actions 7 and 8 are strongly related to the agriculture. And for the another definition by Burkhardt, it may be it's some European people, I'm not quite sure. And he's categorized the sectors related to the green economy as 6 categories: renewable energy and green buildings and clean transportation and water and waste and the land management. And based on our actions or our philosophy, you can see that almost all actions are related to these sectors. So the green economy is essential for low carbon development in Asia. And also, opposite is true. So the low carbon development in Asia is essential for the green economy. So this is my final slide. The GHG mitigation in Asian countries require, of course, Asia countries include, stated here is including Japan, require a lot of challenges, such as enhancing renewables and improving energy efficiencies. But in contrast, these actions will create lots of windows of opportunity for growing the economy. And considering the need of the Asian countries to address a number of environmental and development concerns in parallel, so it is necessary to formulate leapfrogging development strategies and the philosophy showing in 10 actions towards low carbon Asia we have formulated it. And the final point is implementing the strategy enable a shift to low carbon emission and low resource consumption societies while simultaneously improving the economic standards of living in a green and sustainable way. So that's all my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Hi, Ashina-san, ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much, Dr. Ashina. The presentation was focusing on energy, how we can understand the relationship between low carbon economy and the green economy. He presented various country-based scenarios. The conclusion is that Asia is one region, but it's very diverse. So every country in this region has to adopt its own strategy. However, there are commonalities. There are common directions which were depicted by way of 10 actions. I think we are running behind of time, but I think I would like to entertain one or two clarification questions, only for the purpose of clarification.
It's global. Thank you for your very precise and logical presentations. In your presentations, you offer 10 actions to contribute to the green economy. But I have one opinion about that. As you mentioned, each country in Asia have different situations, different culture, histories. So I think in order to process or in order to proceed to achieve such a green economy, we need one upper layer. It means environment and economy. It's fits together. Surface and back, it's tail and head relations. So in order to implement such 10 actions, first, we identify what kind of socio-economic structures, platforms, based on the lifestyle previously I asked, and cultures, and so on. When we establish such things, it becomes goals, objectives. Then such 10 actions based on some technologies will contribute very effective way. How do you think?
Please answer the question.
200% agree with you. So this analysis or this project starts for the extending the current trends of the Asian countries and seeking the feasibility of the low-carbon society in Asia. So we still so far we have not including any drastic changes for the Asian countries. Of course, the lifestyle changes has not been estimated or expected in our results. And of course, the lifestyle, if the lifestyle changes so drastically, maybe the scenario itself changes so drastically as we are now expecting or we are now recommending. So such aspect is very important. We recognize it, but actually it's very tough work for revealing or describing. Sorry, your mentioned point. So as I said, that this fiscal year is our final year. So we try to showing and responding your comments by the next March. So please allow me to bring back to our home as a homework.
Okay, thank you very much.
はい、ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much. Just one more question, the person over there.
Thank you very much. My name's Nick Landreth. I'm a recent graduate from the United Nations University. I was wondering about the low-carbon development scenarios. Obviously, many of these nations have many different overseas development agencies involved, and how perhaps you felt that these development scenarios differ from, say, World Bank PRSPs or other major development scenarios that these countries might follow.
So can I ask again, because just a little bit, your sound is reflected.
Oh, okay. How do low-carbon development scenario differ from mainstream development scenarios?
Sir, thank you for your questions. And so far, so economic, we have not checking the consistency with their economic development plan and the low carbon plan at this moment. Because a current development plan, is not sometimes, but many times, are not aimed to achieve the low carbon society in the future. So the current development plan simply aims to enhance or increase their economic size. So it's totally different from the low carbon society scenario, the low carbon society development plans. So, but later or in the future, we should fit to both the economic development plans and the low carbon society plans. But one example, as shown here, is the Iskandar Malaysia region. We have developed the low carbon society development plan for the Iskandar Malaysia in the last year, I think, and we have submitted to their authority, political authority in Iskandar region. Iskandar region is just next to the Singapore. And they agree with us, and now they changed their development plan for the low carbon way. So such movement has been started. So, but now still so far up to now we have not combined. So most of countries and most of regions we have not combined economic development plans and low carbon development plans. So that's a current situation.
はい、ありがとうございました。それでは最後のスピーカーになります。
Thank you very much. We'd like to go on to the very final speech.
Dr. Shinzu from ISAP.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much again for attending our session on green economy and economic integration in the Asia-Pacific region. We have heard about previous two talks on the regional cooperation for low carbon and green growth in Asia. Now I'm going to talk more specific on a policy measure, the border carbon adjustment and its implications for trade and national emissions. I'm Xin Zhou, working with the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies. So Asia and the Pacific is one of the world's most diverse and dynamic region, full of potential for economic cooperation by taking advantage of their multiple complementarities among its economies. And there are some progress. The ASEAN Economic Community planned to be established in 2015, and the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership launched in May of this year among ASEAN plus 6 countries. And it has been well recognized that achieving sustainable development and the transition to green growth should be the overarching goal guiding the regional integration process. However, in these processes, there are also many concerns from both developing and developed countries. For developing countries, they vary if green economy can be used as for the purpose of green protectionism and influence their exports to the developed countries, because developed countries may require strict technical as well as environmental standards for accession to their markets. For developed countries, they also vary if free trade can create a kind of a suitable environment for free riding, in particular for regional and global environmental issues such as global change. And the stricter environmental policies implemented in developed countries may impact their industry competitiveness adversely. So in this context, a regional integration can be served as the most appropriate platform to discuss these issues and to bring more trade opportunities to all parties and to ensure equity and social and environmental inclusiveness. And the topic I'm going to talk about on the border carbon adjustment is relevant to the concerns of both developing and developed countries. The Kyoto Protocol required only developed countries to reduce their domestic emissions, but did not require developing countries to do so. And this created an asymmetric condition for developed and developing countries to implement domestic climate policies. And implementing a domestic climate policy, such as the carbon tax system or an emissions trading system, means an additional cost to the production cost and change in the terms of trade between the implementing and the non-implementing countries. And this resulted in two great concerns. One is on the industrial competitiveness, and the other is on carbon leakage. And carbon leakage can be created through three channels: the production channel, and the relocation through the investment channel, and the energy channel, because of the global lower energy prices and more consumptions in developing countries. And the sectors that will be impacted the most are identified as those energy-intensive and trade-exposed sectors, such as iron and steel, cement, aluminum, pulp and paper, and chemicals. So in order to address these concerns, many developed countries have discussed intensively about the policy measure of border carbon adjustment, or the BCA. Depending on the different kinds of domestic climate policies, BCA can take different forms, either as a border tax adjustment, such as import tariffs and export rebate, or they can require the importers to surrender allowance under a cap and trade system. And in this upper figure, we can see that for country A, which is the country implementing a domestic climate policy, and country B does not implement any climate policy. And they have compatible terms of trade before A introduced the climate policy. And this is shown by this dotted green line. And when A introduces a domestic climate policy, there will be an additional carbon costs which will change the terms of trade between these two countries, which may be more in favor to the country B. And this is shown by the dotted black line. In order to address this inequality, for country A, which implements also BCA, is try to charge the same amount of carbon costs to the imported products from B. And these will adjust the terms of trade to the equivalent level in country A. And this is shown by the new dotted green line. If the purpose of BCA is not for green protectionism. And if BCA can pass WTO rules, a BCA can be therefore considered a good way to protect the efforts made by developed countries to address their domestic emissions, and as well to prevent carbon leakage that may undermine the efforts made by the developed countries. However, when we look at this policy arrangement more carefully, we can find a hidden inequality embedded in the policy design. This is related to the current national inventory approach of the Kyoto Protocol, which requires countries to report emissions and removals taking place within their national territories. Based on this principle, emissions related to the exports should be reported in the national inventories of exporting countries. And this figure shows country A is a country implements a climate policy, and emitters in country A, they pay for the carbon costs for their emissions, say 10 kilotons of CO2 in exchange for the right to emit. And those 10 kilotons of CO2 will be included in the national inventory of country A, then to report it to the UNFCCC. On the other hand, if country B exports to country A, which should be subject to the BCA implemented by A, and need to pay for the carbon costs of its related emissions, say 20 kilotons of CO2. But when they pay, they cannot receive any emissions credits issued by A. And those 20 kilotons of CO2 should be included in the national inventory of country B and reported to the UNFCCC. Since national inventory can be used as reference for ranking national emissions of nations around the world, as well as for setting binding targets, it can be considered as intangible costs to nations. And based on this case, B pays for the carbon costs of its related 20 kilotons of CO2, but those 20 kilotons of CO2 also included in their national inventory reported to the UNFCCC. It can be considered a double burden charged to country B. In order to address this inequality, we proposed several modifications to BCA. So if country B also implements a compatible domestic climate policy, then B should be exempted from the BCA implemented by A. In such a case, exports from B to A needs not pay for the carbon costs, but the emissions related to that exports, say 20 kilotons of CO2, should be included in the national inventory of country B and reported to the UNFCCC. Another case is if country B does not implement any compatible climate policy, and B should pay for the carbon costs of its related exports, for the emissions-related exports to country A based on the BCA, but at the same time, they can receive the emissions credits from A. And those 20 kilotons of CO2 should be included in the national inventory of country A. Therefore, A shall include 30 kilotons of CO2 in total in its national inventory reporting to the UNFCCC. And we call this National Inventory Adjustment for Trade, or the NIAFT. We applied GTAP incomes, a multi-region computable general equilibrium model, or the CGE model, to assess the impact of a carbon tax policy implemented in Japan and the introduction of different BCA measures and the NIAFT. Our simulation results indicated that carbon tax implemented in Japan can reduce domestic emissions and at the same time trigger the carbon leakage mechanism. However, both effects are very small, due mainly to the lower level of carbon tax rate currently is only less than $3. And our results also indicated BCA can be an effective measure to address the emissions out of the border and therefore effective to address carbon leakage. However, when we considered the NEAFT is introduced, there is a strong negative carbon leakage, which means domestic emissions will increase greatly and emissions from other parts of the world will decrease. And this is contradictory to the aim of a domestic carbon tax policy, which is to address domestic emissions. And the introduction of BCA, as well as the NEAFT, has substantial implications for trade. Since a BCA is a very strong trade measure, it is important for it to be WTO compatibility, and also to ensure it comply with GATT, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, in particular Articles 1, 2, and 3 on national treatment and the most favored nation treatment, as well as GATT Article 20, which requires to prove the substantial link between the trade measure and the stated climate change policy objectives. As I explained before, the inequality hidden behind a BCA by creating a playing field in favor of domestic producers actually cannot pass the national treatment clause and therefore be challenged by the WTO rules. In addition, the strong negative carbon leakage, which means substantial increase in national emissions as well as the national inventory, can be contradictory to the stated objective of domestic climate policy, which is to address domestic emissions. And this will be challenged by GATT Article 20. There are some other issues related to trade and the environment, such as embodied emissions, hidden flow of resource use, and eco-tax implemented in one country but not in others. And again, I think a regional integration can be the most appropriate platform to address these issues and to bring all the parties more trade opportunities and to ensure equity and social and environmental inclusiveness. Thank you very much for your attention.
はい、周さんありがとうございました。
Thank you very much for that presentation. I'm afraid we have very limited time left. So do we have any questions to Dr. Zinzao? And afterwards, we'd like to ask whether or not there are not questions to all the panelists. So I would like to ask if there are any questions from the floor in relation to presentation made by Professor Zinzao. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. I just wondered if you could explain a little more about the conclusion that the NIAFT would lead to domestic leakage.
Okay. Actually, as I explained before, that those emissions related to export, which subject to pay the carbon costs to the BCA implementing countries, should be moved to the national inventory account of the importing country or the developed countries. So this kind of change can make, if you reallocation about the carbon leakage rate, it can change the image of either it's positive or negative.
Thank you very much. Anything else? Then, if not, perhaps we can take questions with regard to all the presentations. Any comments or questions in relation to all the presentation made today in this session? Yes, please. Thank you very much for your interesting presentations. I really appreciate this opportunity. I'm a layman when it comes to green economy, but having your presentation so far, this is the impression that I have. Well, the title of this session is Green Economy and Economic Integration in the Asia-Pacific region. But as many of you are aware, the stage of economic development in Asia-Pacific regions are very diverse. So if you want to talk about integration, then the question of trade comes into this picture. Now, in that case, depending on to what extent green economy has advanced in different countries will dictate whether or not this economic integration will be positive or negative. And also, would not green economy represent non-trade barriers going forward? Any views about this? I would appreciate your views. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. I think you have cited on a very important issue. I think this issue was already addressed in some of the presentations. Any comments, very briefly? So, shall we start with Mr. Ampumosi, please?
Green economy and economic integration in the Asia Pacific. I think your question is very excellent and challenging, and but we need to find the solutions. And as we actually here I see that is this economic integration. That is what we are talking is mostly that is trade integration, and there is another process is also there is political integration and the social integration. Keeping aside this one and economic integration, I think that WTO has identified about 152 goods and services, green goods and services. So basically our objective in the case of economic integration is there is a free flow of goods and services, all these 152 items in this region, whether it is happening or not. Yes and no, and particularly it is happening in the particularly ASEAN level because of their tariff structure. At the intra-region level, basically we find a kind of mixed messages. Why it is? There are two things. One barrier is that is at the border barrier, and another is behind the border barrier. At the border, what happens is these tariff rates. That is, I already mentioned that is how these tariff rates are high, and here much more things has to be done at the national level. The most countries has to come together among the ministries has to speak among themselves. Particularly the Ministry of Industry or the Ministry of Customs, they need to stick together so that the tariff is reduced. And behind the border constraints, we find one is the trade facilitation, that is that happens particularly due to poor infrastructure. Poor infrastructure may result in these transport networks, as well as the poor handling of these facilities, port facilities. And another thing is these IPR regimes, intellectual property regimes. Still, most of the emerging economies are not yet ready. Still, they have the weak regulations and no judicial systems. So, if we want to achieve the full potentials of this economic integration, particularly for the green economy, we need to consider it in a very holistic way. We need to consider both the at the border constraints and the behind the border constraints. And for this study, actually, we conducted basically a study that is how the scenario will be for under three conditions. One is a grand coalition, that is there is no constraints for the goods and services. And second scenario is a sectoral level, that is at the sector. For example, if it is the transport sector, here we find that is how this without any barrier. So it is kind of a limited coalition scenario. And third one is a standalone scenario. That means the countries, they act only themselves. So they don't consider. We find a very encouraging results with the grand coalition scenario. Both the business private sector can prosper and the inclusivity can be obtained. If you want more details, maybe I can give you later. Thank you.
はい、ありがとうございました。それでは芦野さん。
Dr. Ashura, please. Allow me to speak in Japanese. The difference in terms of economic development is also related to low carbon development, which I am specialized in. As you mentioned, economic integration within Asia and Pacific region is to be promoted. So all the countries in Asia Pacific region will act as one. I think that is quite inconceivable as of now. One of the characteristics in Asia and Pacific region is that diversity in terms of the level of development stages. We have a least developing countries and also advanced countries. There is a huge gap among countries in the Asia Pacific region in terms of the stages of development. So if we are to achieve a low carbon development society in this region, if we work together collectively, perhaps only advanced countries will be powerful. But in the case of China, it is expanding the use of solar power. So there will be many companies of these countries which will be selling products to LDC and developing countries. And those countries will be able to achieve low carbon society, but the ones who are making money out of it will be the companies in advanced countries, particularly. So although we say we are covering Asia Pacific region in our research project, however, we work on a local basis. We focus on several particular countries in the region rather than taking Asia as a whole. However, we have to do something, as you mentioned. Mr. Abumori gave a very comprehensive answer, so it is very difficult to add anything more, but my view was from the perspective of low carbon network society.
I think this is a very important questions linking the green economy as well as the economic integration for this region. I think we have heard too many bad stories about how trade contribute to the ecological degradation and to the resource depletion, and also embodied emissions to shift the burden from one country to another. But I think since the economic integration is the kind of common interest of the country in the region, so I think it is important not only to make the economic integration for the benefits of the economic growth in different countries, but also should be in line with the green economy or sustainable development to make trade not detrimental to the natural resources management and to the ecological services that we depend on. I think the UNEP's recent report on trade and the green economy provided also some good experiences and the stories to supporting this point. Thank you very much.
はい、ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much. Actually, we are going overboard now. I think I have to wrap up this session at this point in time. In this session, we focused on green economy and economic integration in the Asia-Pacific region. That was the theme of this session. And the major challenges we are facing is green investment and economic integration and regional cooperation and low-carbon society development, and also international cooperation and carbon leakage. And for that, we have to introduce perhaps border carbon adjustments and so forth. And each speaker talked about the background of these challenges, and specific recommendations have been presented. And of course, there are many other problems we have to try to solve, because Asia is such a diverse region. If we are to integrate the region economically to grow together, to achieve a high level of economic development, yet achieving a low carbon development. So we are facing a very challenging time. So I hope that using this discussion as a basis, we will be able to enhance further discussion and cooperation among countries so that we'll be able to find the solutions by each country for the realization of low carbon society. On that positive note, I would like to conclude this session. My thanks go to all the speakers. Thank you very much. Dr. Ambumori, Dr. Ashina, Dr. Joe, thank you very much. And also, I would like to express my appreciation to all the members of the audience who participated in this region. We are going to take a break until 4:30. In the room 501, there are refreshments available. Please enjoy. From 4:30, we are going to start parallel session 2, exploring reduction in the 3 R's and improving resource efficiency in Asia and the